to rest or not to rest the starters? That is the question on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. The show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. You can also find this show on Amazon, Fire, or Roku. If you have those smart TVs, you can just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. And today's episode, which will feature some Grambles, is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today on the show, I want to answer the question. I got a couple YouTube comments about it, and a couple of people asked me about resting the starters. People are really militantly believe in whatever side of that argument they believe in. And I've seen people just as passionate on both sides of it, which tells me it's probably a pretty interesting decision. So we've talked about it a lot. I think I've answered that question on just about every mailbag for the last 3 weeks. But let's dive in and really go through the pros and cons of resting players. And you can kind of straddle the line between resting and not by putting players on pitch counts or taking them out after halftime or depending on what the score is and stuff. We're also going to talk about some Grambles in the You Betcha segment and bold predictions. Got a special one for you today. But first, let's dive into this. So the Vikings have either the second seed or the third seed. The only way they get the second seed is if San Francisco loses to the David Blau-led Cardinals. Here's what I'm going to say about this. It probably won't happen, but it might. This is how to think probabilistically. There is a chart that I like to post to people who take these sorts of things for granted, where it says like from 10% to 30% chance of something happen, our brains just kind of think that like it won't happen. And if it's like 80% or higher, our brains think that like it will happen, but we don't really think that, no, it's like 4 out of 5 to happen, that it probably will happen, but it also might not happen. Like there is a world where it doesn't happen. And this Arizona-San Francisco game is one of those. It's a 14-point spread. San Francisco is heavily, heavily, heavily favored because they will likely need that game if the Vikings don't screw it up and lose to the Bills, or to the Bears. And so they'll be playing starters and stuff, and then they'll wreck Arizona. But there is always the any given Sunday chance that Brock Purdy throws 4 interceptions, and they screw one up and they lose it, and the Vikings get the 2 seed. But that is what it would take. Thing is, the Vikings don't get to know what happened in the San Francisco or Arizona game. And so there's a whole bunch of kind of if-thens to think about. And if you really like kind of chart, like put them on a table, right? If you rest your starters, and let's just assume that resting your starters means you lose. But it is not guaranteed, right? It's not necessarily. You could win with Nick Mullins. Who knows? They're not starting Justin Fields. He's got a hip problem. He's out. So, Nathan Peterman, I think you still have the QB advantage if you go with Nick Mullins, which is a pretty strong argument to do it. For the sake of simplicity, let's just say it means you lose if you don't play your starters. So then you lose. You're guaranteed to get the 3 seed. You're playing New York, and let's just start preparing for the Giants, right? Let's throw this whole game out the window. Let's just prepare for the Giants for 2 weeks. We'll go do a preseason game plan against the Bears, and we'll be that much more. We'll be rested. We'll be that much more prepared for the Giants. Great, right? But what if San Francisco then goes out and loses to David Blau? What if they screw it up? Or more accurately, what if they would have screwed it up, but you don't get to know that because then they went and rested their starters since they didn't need to win that game anymore. So you just gave your opponent a reason to rest their starters too. Like we play ours, they have to play theirs. And if we both win Wild Card Weekend, then that level of rest / fatigue or whatever might come up. So would you rather be a little more rested than they are, or the other way around? You get to make that choice, I guess. But there may be a universe where if the Vikings play their starters, the Niners would lose. And if they don't, then it doesn't matter, and you've missed that opportunity. There's also the world on the opposite end, right? Where you play your starters and somebody gets hurt and then San Francisco blows out Arizona and it turned out you didn't even need to bother. All of these things are possibilities worth considering. I personally fall on the rest starters part. You are going to have to go on a 4-game win streak here if you want to reach the promised land. That's a long way to go. And they have already played a lot of plays this year. They've had some really long games, Bills, Colts. They've had some bumps and bruises. They're pretty relatively healthy, even with the O-line injuries that happened. They're still one of the healthier teams out there. I mean, San Francisco's on quarterback 3. Jalen Hurts is ailing. And if they don't win against the Giants, who will probably be resting their starters, which is another reason to do it. The Giants can rest starters. If we don't, we are now at a disadvantage in our wild card game. And ultimately, if I miss out on the 2 seed, I'm okay with that. Yeah, home field advantage in that San Francisco game is rough, but Niners aren't guaranteed to win their wild card game, just like we aren't guaranteed to win our wild card game, right? So that is also a thing where there's outcomes where you get the 3 seed and play at home anyways because Green Bay beat the Niners or whatever. The Lions beat the Niners, whoever ends up winning that 7th seed. So all of those things, you kind of have to compile all of those things together. We all agree what the best scenarios are, right? The best scenario is the one where the Vikings win, stay healthy, Niners lose, we go get the 2 seed, we don't get any punishment for it. We all agree it would be terrible to see people get injured in this last game. We all agree that not having home field advantage is going to lessen your odds of beating the 49ers, but it's a matter of to what degree, right? To what degree does the probability of injury measure up to the probability of home field advantage being the difference between winning and losing against San Francisco? And the other thing is, the Vikings just put out a huge stinker. I think they got to wash that taste out of their mouth a little bit. And I think that, to me, that's the most compelling argument that I've heard for playing the starters. They got to figure out their snap count stuff. They have to rehearse that stuff. Let's get a low octane environment where maybe the O-line can do it. And the skill players, maybe you can sit them. Sit Adam Thielen, sit Hawkinson, sit Justin Jefferson if he'll let you. He needs to get like 210 yards or something like that to hit 2K. So whatever. But I would love to see maybe a quarter of Kirk Cousins and, the O-line get their feet wet together a little bit, get Chris Reed a little more acclimated, or Greg Mance, depending on who it is, which, by the way, both of those guys are splitting reps right now with Kirk Cousins. So I don't know what the Vikings are going to do. But whoever plays center, if they have to play center in the playoffs, I would rather that not be the first time that they've had like a full week of practice and actually play in the game. I still think I err on the side of resting being more advantageous because you can practice for 2 weeks and I don't need you to get like true live game action like that. I don't know, like get a quarter, get a drive or something like that just to get your feet wet, maybe. But you don't need a whole game if you have 2 weeks of practice. That should be good enough. So I still err on the side of resting starters. But that's just my opinion. And I genuinely think that if you disagree, if you think, that it's way better to play everybody and to get the rhythm back and you got to get that 2 seed, I totally feel you. And to your credit, the Vikings agree. And they've been very vocal about that. They're going to play this straight up and they're going to try to get that 2 seed. So what I think is pretty moot. Speaking of, let's talk about what's going to happen in that game. And in doing so, we will look at some prop bets and, of course, your boldest predictions. But first, let me talk to you about another way to predict this game, and that is with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Instead of putting together a whole lineup, which especially in Week 18 can be a total nightmare because you don't know who's going to get benched, who's going to get pulled early and all that stuff. Just take some of your favorite players and whether they will do better or worse than their Prize Picks projection. You could just do quarterbacks, right? Because those guys probably won't be pulled as quickly as like a running back might. Or you could do defenders who are going to get sacks against backup tackles. You can do all sorts of stuff. Or you could just not do football at all this week. You could do MDA, or you can do college basketball, men or women. You can do NASCAR or European basketball disc golf. There's all kinds of crazy stuff, and they are currently operational in over 30 states in Canada. So go get the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That means if you deposit $100, you get $100. Deposit 50, get 50 on your first entry, and so on. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all the biggest news headlines out there, all in under a half hour every day. How about check me out on Patreon as well? I have a couple of things that y'all might be really interested in. I did an entire big long thing on snap counts and how they work in the NFL and how the Vikings messed them up against the Packers. I have a big long one on Oli Udoh, who will probably be starting now with Brian O'Neill with a partially torn Achilles, so definitely out for the season. And you're hoping just that next season isn't put into too much jeopardy. And also I have one coming out sometime in the middle of today, Friday, about Justin Jefferson and Jair Alexander. That is sort of a follow-up to the zone coverage article that I wrote. So go check all that out. Patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. It is time for You Betcha, the Gramblin segment, where we take some prop bets and see if we do okay at them. And what we did last week was not even close to okay. We went 0 for 4. It was a disaster because I thought the Vikings would, show up. And they did not. I thought they would score on their first drive. Well, I took it plus 166. I took it as an odds play, but that was a no. I took JJ over 95.5. I had taken JJ overs for 4 weeks in a row, so I was just going to keep riding them till they stopped. And it stopped. He didn't even get over 20. I also had Rodgers under 237.7. I think he got 288, so that was closer than I thought, but no. And then I had both teams over 24.5. I thought this would be like a big shootout. And unfortunately, you don't get points for half right. It was plus 280, though, so I would make that odds play again. And I'm going to make a similar odds play again here against the Chicago Bears. I am taking, you can find all of these lines, by the way, at betonline.net, where the game starts. I am taking both teams to score 19.5 plus 130. They have on like every game, both teams over 24.5, both teams over 19.5. And usually, yes, is positive odds. So when you have a team like the Vikings or a team like, you could probably do great betting this stuff on like the Lions, that has, a good offense and a bad defense, right? That is, I think, a reasonable bet, especially when you can get better than 2-1 odds on it. I also am going to take Cousins over 250.5. This is a bit of a risky proposition, because it is very possible that Kirk Cousins does not play this entire game. If the score is out of hand, you might see him go at halftime or after the third quarter. You might see Justin Jefferson get the early pull. So I didn't make any JJ bets this week. But so I'm making a little bit of a risky proposition, but here is what I will say. A, the Vikings haven't put anybody away since week 1. So I don't really see the blowout thing being, so probable as to dissuade me from this bet. It's certainly an outcome in a way that I can get burned here. 2, we've seen Cousins throw this in a half before. Like if they are blowing him out, he probably already got his 250. And 3, that leads me to my next bet, which is that the first half will be the highest scoring. And you can take that at minus 110, at least as I'm looking at it right now at BetOnline, that the first half will be the highest scoring half. If the game, it's sort of a halfway hedge on this Cousins thing. If I get burned because Cousins gets pulled, it's probably because there was a lot of blowout going on, and it's 24-3 or something in the first half. And then in the second half, I do not foresee a major comeback attempt from Nathan Peterman, so it's kind of a hedge. And there is definitely a world in which I cash both of these, where Cousins does get over 250 and he just scores a lot in the first half and you just kind of hit it like it's a regular game. Right. So I kind of see either those two bets covering each other's bases, or maybe you can hit them both. And then the last one I like is a KJ Osborne anytime touchdown plus 280. He has been pretty good in the red zone lately, and he's especially in the, call it like high red zone, like 20 to, or some people call it, I think, the green zone, which is like the 20 to the 35-ish, where you can take end zone shots, but you're not like truly in the red zone where coverage starts compressing. So you can still kind of call some of your regular chunk plays. And Osborne has been, and he scored in Lambeau in garbage time as well. Also, he's not going to come off the field. When the twos were out, he was still playing. He became wide receiver 1 with Naylor and Rager behind him. But, he just goes from being wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 1 when the twos come out. So I like it at plus 280. I think if it were like under plus 200, I wouldn't take it, but I like it with those odds. So there's your Grambles. Last one of the regular season. We'll have a lot of fun, though, in the playoffs, I think, with this. But what we're going to have even more fun with is the bold predictions. So stay tuned for that, because we got some stuff to go over. The lines you just heard me talk about all came from Bet Online. It is your one-stop shop for all things Grambling. You can find lines like that. You can find more player props. You can find wacky parlay stuff. You can bet right in the middle of a game or event. If the Chiefs, for example, I'm going to be watching this like a hawk on Saturday. If the Chiefs fall behind the Raiders by 2 scores at any moment, I am slamming the Chiefs spread, whatever it is. It'll probably be closer to a regular zeroed out spread, and the Chiefs always make the comeback. It last like 2-3 years, this has been like the easiest money, aside perhaps from Viking overs. You can, of course, also go bet on basketball or hockey or whatever you can find under the sun. That is all at betonline.net, where the game starts. Are you ready to get bold? Are you ready to get a little bit? Are you ready to get a little bit bold? Are you ready to get a little bit bold? Because it's time for the bold prediction segment. It is time to get a little bit bold. This is the bold prediction segment. It's the last one of the regular season. This is where you guys send me your spiciest predictions, and if you're right, we party. And let's go over the predictions from last week to see if we have a party to look at, and then we'll go over some predictions for the Week 18 game. But first, from Week 17, Kirk Crusader said that Justin Jefferson would break the all-time receiving record in that game by going for 209. Of course, we did not even get close to that. JV Swap said that Zarius Smith would score more touchdowns than Christian Watson. Absolutely loved the spirit of that one. And Christian Watson did not look very good in that game until the very end. He got a couple of catches, but he had more trouble with Duke Shelley than I think you would want your budding superstar type receiver. People call him the next Randy Moss. Randy Moss would not struggle with Duke Shelley, but no Za'Darius Smith touchdowns. Thursky said that JJ, TJ, KJ, AJ Dillon, and CJ would all score touchdowns. All the J's, Jefferson, Hawkinson, Osborne, and Ham plus AJ Dillon would score touchdowns. We got KJ. Unfortunately, that's it. I think, no, we got an AJ Dillon one, I think, among there somewhere. Goggles said that in the ultimate Duke Shelley game, he would get mossed for the game-tying TD late in the 4th, only to find redemption with a pick 6 in OT. Yep, nope. They got blown out. Bradley Norris said that with O'Connell resting starters and giving young guys work, every backup has a memorable game-defining play. Oh, man. If the backups had like hilarious, embarrassing moments, like the Chris Reed snap count thing, I would like give you that. Like memorable and game defining, right? But I don't think we got anything like that from Tonga or Duke Shelley or anything. Like Duke Shelley had a pretty good game, so I don't think we hit that. But that would have had to be the spirit. And then finally, one from my uncle, who said that Aaron Rodgers would not finish the game. Folks, we cashed one, and you know what that means. It is time to party.
Venet tempus ad personam justitiam. Venet tempus ad personam justitiam.
I hope that audio listeners, if you get a chance, go to YouTube and watch the visual component of that. For now, let's move on to this week's. I've got new bold predictions, and I'm very excited for them. The first one comes from Squeaks, who says that JJ will hit 2K anyways. So He needs 229 yards to hit 2,000. I think he needs like 190 something to hit the record, but we're talking about 2,000. We're talking JJ2K. We've been tracking this all season. 229 would be the amount. If he gets up to 229 before he gets a baseball cap in a game that does not mean very much, I will be extraordinarily impressed. And oh my goodness, will we party over that if he hits 2K. Jordan Barrett says that Peterman will rush for the yardage Fields would have needed to beat the single season record by a quarterback. He thinks 64. I looked it up, 63. You were close. So Peterman will rush for 63 yards. That would be pretty insane for a guy who isn't Justin Fields. Fields could have totally hit that against us. So a bit of a bummer that he doesn't play, but in future of your franchise, he's supposed to be right. So I guess you got to protect him. Trill Swaggets says, the Flying Jays. In a cruel monkey paws cursed twist, the two Jaylins, Rager and Naylor, JJ, I get Jaylin and Jaylin, will combine for over 26 receptions and 250 receiving yards, both values needed for Jefferson to break the single season receptions record. So similar spirit to the Peterman one. It's 193 is what these guys would need to get, and 26 receptions for 193 would be the record. So I'm going to give you 193. It doesn't need to be 250. I thought about doing 229 for 2K, but you did say the record, and we also are parlaying it with receptions. And also, I don't think these guys are going to play very much because the Vikings have already said it. I think that is plenty bold. Joshua Brook says that Josh Rosen will be the only QB to rush and throw for a touchdown. So I love this. It's, of course, very possible for the Bears to just not get any quarterback touchdowns. They could all just be rushing touchdowns. They could just not score touchdowns on offense because it's Nathan Peterman. And the only QB to rush or throw for a touchdown. Yeah, so you can have all the running back touchdowns you want. This also would require the Vikings to not play Kirk Cousins, to deactivate Kirk Cousins. He'll be on the sideline in a hoodie. Elevate Josh Rosen from the practice squad for the game, play him as a backup, and then Nick Mullins would have to either get hurt or pulled for some reason, and then Josh Rosen would be the only one to get in there, and then he has to score, and then nobody else does. This is beautifully bold. Dried Up Mon Pond has a nice one, a tribute to DeMar Hamlin. By the way, seems to be awake, lucid. Very happy to hear that. Love it. We have a couple of former teammates of his on the Vikings in Patrick Jones from Pitt and Harrison Phillips from the Bills. And he says that they will combine for exactly 3 sacks and that no other Viking would record one. Of course, he wears number 3. I like that one. That one makes me happy. Good stuff. Dried Up Mon Pond. It's very unfortunate Twitter at. David Schuyler, I'm sorry if I botched that, says that the Vikings would score 4 touchdowns, but only one of them will come from the offense. Classic bold prediction right there. That's a staple of this here segment. We'll see how all of this goes. We'll see how week 18 goes. Of course, we're all just crossing our fingers, hoping to get out of this one healthy, because there is just not that much at stake except for the 2 seed, which is something. It's meaningful, but certainly they're not going to play this one like the Packers and Lions are going to play their game, right? And I am so excited. I love week 18. It is the last week of the regular season is almost as fun to me as like wild card weekend is. It's so much fun. So I'm stoked. I hope you guys have just as much fun as I know I'm going to. And I will see you all next week. And then we get to start previewing the actual playoffs, which the Vikings are in for the first time since 2019. I'm so excited. We're going to have a gosh darn blast, no matter how it goes down. So come on and enjoy the ride with me. I'll see y'all next time. And as always, Skull.